Fiona had been lying to me for months. I knew it the second I saw her phone light up with a name she shouldn't recognize. It wasn't some gut feeling, no creeping suspicion gnawing at me. Just fact. I picked up the phone, turned it over in my hand. A message preview flashed on the screen. Had a great time last night. Can't wait to see you again. My name is Grayson Dawson, 58 years old. Former Marine. Grew up breaking horses and fixing fences on my father's ranch outside of Abilene. Now I run a security consulting firm in Dallas. Build a life off discipline, knowing how to size up a man before he made his first move. Fiona must have thought she was real slick, stepping out with some gym rat who didn't know how to hold his hands up in a fight. She walked into the kitchen, heels clicking against the tile. Smelled like expensive perfume and bad decisions. Morning, she said, stopping at the fridge, rummaging for whatever kept her from eating like a normal person. I set the phone down. Who's Derek? She froze, just for a second, then turned, all bright-eyed innocence. What? Derek. I tapped the phone. Text popped up. Her smile stayed in place, but her fingers curled a little tighter around the fridge door. Oh, that. He's just a trainer at the gym. We've been doing some private sessions. Private sessions. Hell of a way to put it. I leaned back, watching her work through the mental gymnastics. She knew I wouldn't shout, wouldn't throw things or make a scene. I'd sit there, silent, let her unravel. That's all. I asked. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Yes, that's all. She was a good liar. Always had been. But good wasn't enough. I gave her one last chance to come clean. You sure? A flicker of something in her eyes, irritation, maybe even amusement, like she was humoring me. Yes, Grayson. I'm sure. That was all I needed. I stood, took my coffee with me, and walked past her to the porch. Texas sun beat down on the land, stretching for miles. A hawk circled overhead, looking for something small and weak to take. I wasn't a man who spent time wondering why people did what they did. Some folks had good in them, some didn't. And some, like Fiona, liked to have it both ways, security at home, a thrill on the side. I thought about confronting Derek. Could already picture the guy, early 30s, sun-streaked hair, all smiles and protein shakes. Men like that spent their lives charming women into bad decisions, never thinking about the cost. But this wasn't about him. It was about Fiona. I finished my coffee, set the mug on the rail. This wasn't a situation you handled with emotion. It was one you handled with strategy. Fiona thought she had options. I was about to take every one of them away. That night, I made a call. Hank Zimmer answered on the second ring. Grayson. Hank. You sound like a man with a problem. I glanced back at the house. Fiona sat curled up on the couch, phone in her hand, sending a text she thought I didn't see. Not a problem, I said. Just an opportunity. Hank chuckled. That bad. I gave him the short version. No need for details. Hank didn't ask questions, just listened. When I finished, he exhaled, long and slow. Damn. Didn't peg Fiona for the type. Neither did I. You want to handle this clean or messy? Clean, I said. For now. He grunted. Tell me what you need. That's why I called Hank. No pity, no hand-wringing, just straight to the next move. I told him I needed a lawyer, someone who could lock Fiona out of everything before she even saw it coming. Someone who could make sure when she left, it wasn't with half of what I built. Hank gave me a name. You'll like him, he said. Cold as they come. Good. I hung up and sat in the dark, listening to the house settle. Fiona laughed at something on her phone. Probably Derek. I let it sit for a minute. Let it sink in. Then I got up, grabbed a beer, and started making a list. By morning, she wouldn't know it, but the ground had already shifted beneath her feet. By the next morning, the first moves were already in motion. I wasn't a man to let problems sit and rot. You handled them quickly and quietly. I called the lawyer Hank recommended, a guy named Victor Holcomb. He picked up on the first ring. This is Holcomb. Grayson Dawson. Hank Zimmer gave me your name. That was all I needed to say. Holcomb didn't waste time on pleasantries. What's the situation? Wife's cheating. I want her locked out of everything before she knows what's coming. A pause. Then a low, approving chuckle. Good. Most men call me after they've already lost half. You looking for divorce or just leverage? For now, just leverage. But I want options. Smart. He tapped a pen against his desk. I could hear it through the line. We can start by refinancing any shared assets under your name only. If you're the primary earner, we make sure she's got no claim to them once the papers hit. You still love her? Not anymore. Good. Love makes people stupid. Meet me in my office at noon. Bring every financial document you've got. I hung up and stepped onto the porch. Sun was just starting to burn off the morning chill. Fiona was still inside, probably getting ready for another training session with Derek. I took a long look at the land. 40 acres of Texas dirt, bought and paid for with years of sweat and strategy. She wasn't taking any of it. By the time I got to Holcomb's office, he already had papers waiting. He was a sharp-dressed man, silver hair, no nonsense. He slid a folder across the desk. This is what we do first. We move any joint accounts under your name. Adjust mortgage terms. You have a prenup? No. His expression didn't change. Then we make sure she doesn't get a dime more than necessary. I thumbed through the paperwork. Clean. Precise. No wiggle room. Just the way I liked it. How soon? I asked. Couple days to finalize. She won't even know it's happening. That was all I needed. I shook his hand and left. By the time I got home, Fiona's car was gone. I stepped inside, walked through the house, noting the small changes. The perfume lingering in the air, the way the bed was still made on my side. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I checked my watch. She'd be at the gym, wrapped around Derek's words, letting him pour cheap flattery into her ear. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter. This wasn't about emotion. It was about control. She wanted excitement. She'd get more than she bargained for. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip low, when Hank's truck rumbled up the driveway. He stepped out, big as ever, his usual scowl in place. Well? He asked, settling into the chair beside me. Locked down the assets. He nodded, cracking open his own beer. She know? Not yet. He grunted. She will soon. Women like her always do. I sipped my drink, watching the sky darken. Good. A silence stretched between us. Comfortable. Hank finally broke it. You gonna tell her? Not yet. She'll play the victim when she finds out. I smirked. Then she'll learn what it's like to lose. Hank chuckled, low and mean. Damn right. We sat there as the stars came out. Two men who had seen enough of life to know how the game worked. Fiona thought she was running the show, but she had no idea who she was playing against. 2 days later, the paperwork was done. The accounts were shifted, the mortgage refinanced, and Fiona was no longer tied to a single asset in my name. She didn't know it yet. Wouldn't know until she needed something and found the door locked. That was fine. I wanted her to feel secure. Let her think she had time, that she was still calling the shots. People get reckless when they believe they're safe. I was sitting in my truck outside the gym, engine idling, watching. Through the glass doors, I could see them. Fiona and Derek. She was laughing, leaning into him the way a woman does when she's already made up her mind. Derek, wearing a tight sleeveless shirt, smirking like he had the world figured out. He had the easy charm of a man who'd never had to fight for anything. Everything handed to him. A strong jawline. A body built in a gym instead of hard work. A confidence that only came from never getting punched in the mouth. I let them be. Let her live in the lie a little longer. I wasn't the man she thought I was. I wouldn't beg, wouldn't scream, wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. I played the long game. Later that night, I was in the office when Fiona walked in, phone in her hand, a glass of wine in the other. She leaned against the doorway like nothing was wrong. Hey, you working late? I didn't look up from my desk. Yeah. She took a sip of her drink, watching me. You've been quiet. I signed the last document, set the pen down. Busy week. Everything okay? I finally met her eyes. She held my gaze, waiting, looking for something. Anger, resentment, maybe even weakness. I gave her nothing. Fine. She nodded, hesitating, like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she turned and walked away, phone lighting up in her hand. Probably Derek. I watched her go, then picked up my own phone and dialed Clay Lawson. Clay was a real estate agent I knew from a few years back, slick as they came, always chasing a deal. He picked up on the second ring. Grayson Dawson. You looking to buy or sell? Neither. Got a house I need to move quick. That's so? Market's good right now. What are we talking about? My wife doesn't know it yet, but we're getting divorced. House is in my name. I want it gone before she even gets a whiff of it. Clay whistled low. You're a cold man, Dawson. I didn't bother correcting him. Can you do it or not? Oh, I can do it. Cash buyers are always looking for a deal. How fast do you want it gone? A week. That'll cost you. I don't care. He chuckled. Damn. All right. Send me the details, I'll get on it. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Fiona thought she had time. Thought she was walking away from this clean. By the time she realized what was happening, she'd be looking at an empty house and a locked bank account. A part of me wanted to feel bad. Another part knew she deserved every bit of what was coming. A week later, Clay called. Got a buyer. Cash offer. They'll close in 3 days. I nodded, staring out at the land. Good. You gonna tell her? Or you want her to find out when the moving trucks show up? She'll figure it out soon enough. Clay laughed, the kind of laugh a man gives when he's watching a fire burn but knows he won't get singed. Remind me never to cross you, Dawson. I hung up and took a slow sip of my coffee, watching Fiona in the kitchen through the window. She was on the phone, smiling, probably talking to Derek, making plans for whatever lie she'd come up with today. I let her have it. She'd get her wake-up call soon enough. That evening, she came home late. I was in the garage, working on the truck, when she walked in. Hey, she said, tossing her purse on the bench, a little too casual. I wiped the grease off my hands. You eat. I grabbed something with the girls. A lie. I didn't bother calling it out. Let her dig the hole herself. She poured a glass of wine, leaned against the counter, watching me. I was thinking, maybe we should take a trip. That almost made me laugh. I set the rag down. A trip? Yeah, you've been so busy. We could go somewhere, get away, just us. I met her eyes. Where's this coming from? She shrugged, took a slow sip. Just thinking we need it. She was testing the waters, seeing how much control she still had. I let the silence stretch, let her sit in it. Not a good time, I finally said. A flicker of something crossed her face. Disappointment. Maybe frustration. Grayson, we can't just work all the time. I nodded, walking past her. We sure can't. That was the last night she went to bed thinking she had the upper hand. The next morning, she woke up to an email. I was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, when she walked in, phone gripped tight in her hand. Grayson. I didn't look up. Morning. What the hell is this? I glanced at her, saw the email open on her screen. The finalized house sale. The buyer's deposit clearing. Her name nowhere on it. I took another sip of coffee. Looks like escrow went through. Her voice sharpened. You sold the house? I set the mug down. Yeah. She blinked, like she couldn't quite process it. Without talking to me? I leaned back in my chair. House was in my name. Didn't think I needed to. Her breath hitched, just slightly, before she found her anger. You don't get to make that decision on your own. I do, actually. She was unraveling now, pacing, gripping the phone like she wanted to throw it. Jesus, Grayson, what the hell is wrong with you? I didn't answer. Just watched her come apart. You've been acting different, she snapped. Like you don't even care. That made me smile. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. Fiona, let me ask you something. She folded her arms, defensive. What? You having fun with Derek? That landed like a punch. Her face drained, just for a second, before she covered it with anger. What the hell are you talking about? I didn't blink. Didn't raise my voice. Just let the words sit between us. I know, Fiona. Her breath stuttered. You don't know shit. I nodded. All right. I picked up my coffee again. Then you won't mind showing me your phone. She didn't move. Just stood there, breathing hard, jaw tight. That was my answer. I stood, calm, steady. House is sold. Bank accounts are locked. You'll get what I decide to give you in the divorce. If you're smart, you won't fight it. She opened her mouth, shut it, then tried again. You don't get to do this. I just did. Her face twisted, something between rage and panic. You bastard. I shrugged. Maybe, but at least I'm not a liar. She threw the glass. It shattered against the wall, red wine dripping like blood. I didn't flinch. Just looked at her, steady. Pack your things, Fiona. You've got 3 days. I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Where are you going? She called after me, voice shaking. I stopped, turned back just enough to meet her eyes. To enjoy my damn day. Then I walked out, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her own choices. 3 days later, she was gone. Took what she could fit in the back of her Lexus, left the rest. The house echoed without her, but not in a way that made me miss anything. Just space that felt cleaner. Lighter. She didn't go quietly, though. First, she tried calling. I let it ring. Then the text started. We need to talk. You can't just do this. You don't get to treat me like this, Grayson. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She made her bed. Now she could lie in it, just not in my house. I was in my truck when Hank called. Saw Fiona's car leaving town. Yep. She tried to pull anything? Couple texts. No real fight. He chuckled. Bet that burned her worse than anything. Women like that, they want a reaction. You didn't give her one. Nope. You see Derek? Not yet. Hank let that hang for a second. You planning to? Thinking about it. He grunted. Don't kill the guy. You got too much going for you. I know. He sighed. All right. But if you do break his nose, at least make it look like an accident. I smirked. Noted. I hung up and drove to town, stopping at a diner off the main road. A place I'd been coming to for years. Coffee was strong, food was simple, and nobody gave a damn about your business unless you wanted them to. The bell over the door jingled when I stepped inside. A few old-timers glanced up from their tables, gave me a nod. I nodded back, took my usual seat near the window. Maya, the waitress, came over, pen tapping against her pad. Same as always, Grayson? Yeah. She didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't pry. Just poured my coffee and went back behind the counter. That's why I liked the place. I was halfway through my meal when I saw him. Derek. Walking down the sidewalk, gym bag slung over his shoulder like he thought he was in some kind of damn movie. He stopped outside, checking his reflection in the glass of a parked car, fixing his hair. I took my time finishing my coffee. Then I left a few bills on the table, grabbed my keys, and walked outside. Derek didn't see me at first. He was too busy adjusting his shirt, making sure the muscles he spent all day sculpting were on full display. Then he caught my reflection in the car window and turned, a cocky smirk already in place. Hey, his smirk faltered just a little. Fiona's husband. I stepped closer, letting him feel the weight of that. Not anymore. He laughed, but it was forced. Listen, man, I don't want any trouble. I stared at him. That right? He shifted his weight, trying to keep that fake confidence up. Look, I didn't mean for any of this to. I cut him off. You knew she was married. He hesitated. She said you guys were having problems. I nodded. And you thought that was your opening. His mouth opened, then closed. No more excuses to reach for. I took a slow step forward, just enough to make him feel it. Here's the thing, Derek. I don't give a damn about you. You're nothing. A footnote in a mistake Fiona made. He swallowed hard, shifting back. So, we good? I tilted my head. You think we're good? He held up his hands. Look, man, I didn't let him finish. Didn't need to. I didn't throw a punch, didn't shove him, didn't even touch him. Just stepped close enough that he had to step back. Then I leaned in, voice low. You ever cross my path again, you'll wish I was the kind of man who just throws a punch and walks away. His face paled. I hear you. I stepped back, nodded. Good. Then I turned, got in my truck, and left him standing there, all that fake bravado gone. I didn't need to break him. He was already broken. I drove out past the edge of town, where the roads got long and empty, let the silence settle in. There was something about a stretch of open highway that cleared a man's head. No noise, no distractions. Just the road, the hum of the engine, and a sense that you were moving forward. Fiona was gone. Derek knew to keep his distance. The house would be out of my hands by the end of the week. I had done what I set out to do. Didn't feel much of anything about it. No sense of victory, no weight of regret. Just another problem handled, another door closed. My phone rang. Hank again. Where you at? Driving. You heading anywhere? Nope. He grunted. Good. Then you got time for a drink. I checked the clock. It's 3 in the afternoon. Yeah, and? I smirked, shook my head. Where? Same place as always. I turned the truck around and headed back toward town. Hank didn't waste words on things like checking in or making sure a man was all right. He knew me. Knew that once I made up my mind about something, it was done. The drink was more of a closing chapter than anything else. The bar was half empty, quiet except for a few regulars. I walked in, spotted Hank at a corner table, a beer already sitting across from him, waiting for me. Figured you'd show, he said as I sat down. I took a sip, nodded. Figured I would too. He leaned back, studying me. You look lighter. Maybe. She's out of your system? She was out the second I saw that text. He smirked. That's what I figured. We sat there, drinking in silence for a while. No need to talk things to death. When the beers were empty, Hank drummed his fingers on the table. So what's next? I shrugged. Haven't thought that far. He snorted. Bullshit. You don't make a move without thinking 5 ahead. I gave him a look. He wasn't wrong. Truth was, I had been thinking about it. About what came next. For the first time in a long time, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Didn't have to answer to anyone's expectations but my own. I might take a trip, I finally said. Hank raised an eyebrow. Where? Not sure yet. Just somewhere I haven't been. He considered that, then nodded. About time. The bartender walked by, dropped the tab on the table. Hank grabbed it before I could. First round's on me, he said. I didn't argue. Just stood, stretched, and grabbed my keys. If I don't hear from you, I'll assume you're off being a mysterious son of a bitch somewhere, Hank said as I turned to leave. I grinned. Something like that. Then I walked out, got in the truck, and hit the road. Didn't know exactly where I was going, but for the first time in a long time, I had nowhere I needed to be. I drove for a while, taking back roads when I could, stopping when I felt like it. No plan, no schedule. Just me and the open stretch of America, a full tank of gas, and a whole lot of country to cover. First, I headed west, into the dry heat of New Mexico, then up through Colorado, where the air was crisp, and the mountains made a man feel small in the best way. I didn't talk much, didn't check in. Just let the world move around me while I stayed quiet. Then one morning, I found myself in Montana, standing on a ridge overlooking a valley so wide it felt like the earth had no end. Sky so clear it made you wonder why people spent their lives boxed into cities. Wind cut sharp against my face, carrying nothing but the smell of pine and dirt. It was the kind of place that didn't give a damn who you were before you got there. My phone rang. Hank. I let it buzz a few times before picking up. Hell, I was starting to think you finally went off the grid, he said. Maybe I did. He snorted. Where you at? I looked out over the land, taking in the way the sun hit the peaks in the distance. Somewhere that makes sense. That's so? He let out a breath. Figured you'd be back by now. Nothing to come back to. A pause. Hank wasn't the kind of man to push, but he wasn't one to let something sit unspoken either. You regret it? Not for a damn second. Good. A pause. She tried calling me. That made me smirk. Yeah. Wanted to know if I'd talk to you for her. Said she had some things she wanted to say. She'll figure out soon enough, I don't care what they are. Another pause, then Hank chuckled. I told her as much. I nodded to myself, watching a hawk circle in the sky. She's still with Derek? Hell no. That fell apart fast. She thought she was trading up, but turns out that kid wasn't built to last. His wife took him for everything in the divorce. Jim went under. Last I heard, he's training rich housewives out in the suburbs, trying to scrape by. Poetic justice. I let that sit for a second before asking, and Fiona? Bouncing around, from what I hear. Thought she'd get some big settlement, but your lawyer made sure she walked away with what? A few grand and a bad reputation. He let out a low whistle. That's gotta sting. Didn't feel much of anything about that. Just how it had to be. Some people only learn when the lesson costs them. Ain't that the truth? We sat in silence for a beat, both of us knowing there wasn't much more to say. Hank finally sighed. Well, guess I'll let you get back to whatever the hell it is you're doing. Yeah. You planning on staying gone? For a while. Well, when you're done chasing the wind, you know where to find me. I nodded. Take care, Hank. You too, brother. I ended the call and slid the phone back into my pocket. Stood there for a while longer, just breathing, letting the cold settle into my bones. I built my life on discipline, on knowing when to push forward and when to cut my losses. This wasn't a loss. It was a clean slate. I took one last look at the valley, then turned and walked back to my truck. Climbed in, fired up the engine, and pulled back onto the road. Didn't look back.